everyone and welcome to this video, and today I'm going to be doing an album review of a brand new album, first album review from 2023. I'm going to be looking at the new one by the Lathums, From Nothing to a Little Bit More. So yes, I'll just be doing my usual thing in this video, a bit of quick background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this is the second album by the Wigan band, released on the 3rd of May 2023, of course. So since the release of their debut, How Beautiful Life Can Be, back in the end of 2021, they've gone through a fairly significant lineup change, with the bass player, like the original bass player Johnny Cunliffe, leaving the band. He has since been replaced by a guy called Matty Murphy, and I'm still not 100% clear who is actually playing bass on this album, because I'll show you my vinyl copy in a bit, but on all the inner sleeves and all the credits, it's just credited to the three core members of the band, without any musical credits at all. I'm really not sure whether this new bassist Matty is playing on this album, to be honest with you. They've also decided to change their producer since the last album. So the first album was produced by the Corals, James Kelly. However, on this record, they decided to use a guy called Jim Abyss, who produced the likes of the Arctic Monkeys and also Adele's first two albums. So very well esteemed producer. So far, since the album was released only last week, it has received a mostly positive critical reception from many publications. I'm definitely hoping that it will reach #1 in the UK like their last album did. We'll probably know by the time I get around to uploading this video. But yeah, it would be really great if they got another #1 album. As I said, critical reception has been mostly pretty good. I said it's been slightly more muted than the debut album, possibly, but still all round generally pretty good reviews of it. Also, should just add at this point, they a couple of days ago only, they released a further EP containing 4 more bonus tracks, or what they would have probably called it the 80s B-sides, if these songs had been singles. And some others are really good. There's a particular one called Knotted Bed of Roses, I think would have made a great addition to the album. All the others perhaps slightly feel a little bit second tier bonus track sort of material, but that first song, a really great track, Knotted Bed of Roses. So anyway, I will show you my vinyl copy of it here now. You can probably tell this is not the normal vinyl version. This is a exclusive pressing to a shop in Edinburgh called Asai Records, and they often with new releases do these special Obi editions. So this isn't a Japanese pressing or anything. Not sure why they do it. Obviously Japanese pressings with vinyls tend to be a little bit more sought after than the usual pressings, but I think it looks quite cool. I mean, it does come off, but it is very tightly packed to this, so I'm not going to remove it. But here's the cover, a great cover, I think. This young guy's supposed to look a bit like the singer, Alex Moore, same glasses and sort of hairstyle and whatnot, but no, really nice cover here though. There's a back of it there, you've got the track listing. And as I said, with the artwork, it's only showing the 3 core members. So you've got Alex Moore, Scott Conception who is the guitarist, so he also plays piano, and Ryan Durrance, the drummer. So there's no picture off a bassist, and as I said, all the credits, there's no bass player credited, or there's no instruments credited. So again, it's a bit of a mystery at whether it's Johnny, the new bass player, or whether one of the band members took on the role. But this is, as I said, it's the exclusive version to UK independent record stores, this, so it's on a lovely red vinyl there. Okay, so I'll now go over each of the album songs in detail. I'll score each track out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So the opening track is called Struggle. Now this was one of the preview singles, but it came out slightly late, maybe only a few weeks before the album. And this song blew me away absolutely, on first listen. It's a great track, I think. Just the way it builds up musically, and also the incredibly powerful lyric about more reflecting on the loss of a loved one, and how he's struggled to come to terms with that. So you've got some great heart on on the sleeve lyrics like, I wake up without a smile on my face, I notice the world's turning but I'm stood still, and the voices in my head, they tell me that I will wind up dead if I continue the path that I'm on. And as I said, I love the way the music builds, and it kind of becomes almost like a kind of indie banger, but with these very reflective, very kind of potent like lyrics on it. So for me, it is my favourite on the album. I personally though would have preferred it if it had come slightly later like on the album, because it almost feels a bit like, I mean, like we get into like the later tracks, but it almost feels like everything else is a little bit like off like an anticlimax compared to this song, just because it's such a strong track. So maybe would have suited being a little bit later like on the album, but that's my only gripe with it. But because the actual song itself like is fantastic, so yeah, Struggle for me would get a 10 out of 10. Next track up is Say My Name. Now this was one of the other early release singles, came out sometime last year I think, and I must say I wasn't all that into it when it was released. It's a definite departure from like their debut album. The guitars are kind of turned up a bit and a bit more distorted, a little bit more kind of beef to them. Kind of Scott Conception's like channeling like his inner like Jimmy Page like on this one, and again with lyrics which are kind of reflective of a kind of like the loss like of like a loved one. He sings like, I don't mind if it's my time, I've lost my faith in what I used to hide behind, it's just the thought of you what I leave behind. So again, good lyrics, and musically we can see the development like from like the kind of like away from like the kind of jingly jangly nature like of like their debut album, but it's definitely a song which has grown on me like since it was released. I think it suits being the second song. It's a good injection like of like energy like onto the album, a strong memorable track, and again good harmony vocals, a good kind of propulsive almost disco-y kind of bass line like on this one as well. So overall a really strong track there. For me would get a 9 out of 10.
But you know it's best to let them go.
Okay, next up is called I Know Part 1. I mean, I'm not sure like if there's going to be a Part 2 coming up or like whatnot, like, but this is a brilliant track, and I think musically I absolutely cannot find fault with it. It's got a very retro kind of late 50s, early 60s feel to it. It reminds me a lot of the Beatles cover of Please Mr. Postman. It's almost like you can kind of close your eyes and like imagine like the Beatles sort of doing this song. It's very much like a kind of 60s group doing a cover like of a Motown song, so it's a very kind of specific sound like they get like on like this track, and lyrically it's really good like for like the most part. You're kind of telling the tale like of like a heartbreak. He sings like, I asked a girl what's wrong with me, she said, silly boy, you made me believe we would never be apart, you drove a dagger straight through my heart. But for me, the song's weakness, though, comes in the chorus, where it's essentially just that line, I know, repeated. I mean, Alex Moore sings it great, and it sounds really good, but I just wish he'd maybe worked a little bit harder, like, on, like, the chorus, you know? It kind of feels a little bit underwritten, this song, personally. But yeah, overall, a really strong track though, and like yeah, it's mostly for me the music what kind of carries it. It's like definitely unlike any other Lathums track, this for me. So yeah, it would get a 9 out of 10 overall for I Know Part 1.
But I found my lucky bean that you found.
Next up is called Lucky Bean. Now this one is a really upbeat song, very kind of summery, sort of like jangly acoustic guitars, almost like a kind of return in a way to the kind of sounds like off like their debut things like Oh My Love and like I'll Get By, that kind of feel like to like this one here. So it's very kind of House Martin Z kind of style, this track, but kind of channeling their kind of second album a little bit, because you got some brass like on here, which again shows a kind of development like off like their sound. Lyrically it's another good song, kind of about finding like a special person, or like in this song like who he refers to like as like a lucky bean. So he sings like, I thank my lucky bean that I found you, and I know I don't want to be alone, maybe you're the best of me. And it's a good song. Again, it's very upbeat, very happy-go-lucky kind of track, maybe a bit cheesy, but I like it though. Again, I think it's a really good positive like upbeat track. So yeah, Lucky Bean for me would get a 9 out of 10. Okay, next one up, we turn up the pace a little bit more on this one, or rather like the volume a little bit more, like on this one, a song called Facets. Now this is, I think, one of their oldest songs. I'm sure I remember seeing like a YouTube video of them doing this live sometime like 2019, like one of like their very early gigs. So it's a song which was left off like their debut, like if like that is like the case. I mean, it's a solid rocker, this one. It's maybe a little bit forgettable, with a very kind of wordy kind of like verse, like on this one, like he's packing in a lot, almost a bit nonsensical, like I think, but it's a good song. And again, I think it kind of like the way that he kind of sings it, it's kind of got a kind of like sort of like a good kind of memorable hook like to it, like so yeah, like for me, Facets would get an 8 out of 10.
I've seen the rise, I've seen the fall.
Okay, next up is called Rise and Fall. Now this one for me would get a 7 out of 10. It is definitely a rather average kind of like Lathums track for me. Very kind of safe territory for them, both kind of musically and also lyrically, about the kind of difficulties like of like kind of like young like adulthood. He sings like, I've seen the rise, I've seen the fall, heaven knows I've seen it all, be given things I don't deserve, but I know that I'll prove my worth. I do quite like, there's a good instrumental bit what comes just after like that chorus where things kind of, it sounds a bit more kind of laid back and the kind of instruments kind of drop out a little bit. I quite like that, and you've got some kind of sort of semi-experimental guitar loops going on like as well. I just wish that the track was a bit more like that, like for like its length, rather than the kind of slightly more generic kind of like acoustic sort of like kind of like very kind of mid-tempo kind of song like that it is, like for like the most part. So yeah, for me, Rise and Fall would get a 7 out of 10. It's, yeah, slightly kind of like Lathums by numbers. Okay, next track up, opening up to side 2 on the album, is Sad Face Baby. Now this was officially like the debut single for the album, but it came out almost like a year ago now, and again wasn't one which I was a big fan of when it was like released, but it's grown on me a little bit. I think it fits the album. I like that kind of like the riff what kicks off the song, and again you've got this kind of like this very full on kind of guitar sound, which I think is very like gives it like a very like anthemic kind of feel, and that kind of contrast between the kind of sort of slow kind of very drawn out verses and then the kind of chorus, which is just like a burst like of energy. Again, my only gripe with this one here, and I don't want to sound too much like a wuss, but like I'm not particularly a big fan of the swearing he does like on like the verse on here. Now I mean I've got no problem like with swearing like in songs like when it makes a point like, or it's kind of powerful like, or like unexpected. I'm thinking of like the Beautiful South song like Don't Marry Her, Fuck Me, like where like you don't expect it, just kind of comes out of nowhere. Whereas this one here, for me, it just seems a bit like they're trying a bit too hard to appear kind of, yeah, hard on manly, and kind of move away from that kind of slightly, I guess, lightweight kind of jangly sounds like they kind of that were known for like up to like this point. And I must say, like, I do prefer like the live version where he sings like in a mixed up, messed up, broken world rather than like effed up like world. Like that's my only gripe with it. I just think that there's no, it's not like there's no need for it, but it just kind of, it just grates a little bit. I don't know what it is, like, but yeah, just something about it like just doesn't quite work for me. But musically, it's a great song. So overall, that one would get an 8 out of 10. Next up is called Turmoil. Now this is a real kind of, yeah, change in direction a bit like for like the Lathums. It's a kind of very much a kind of like heartstring kind of tugging sort of ballad. This one here reminds me quite a bit musically. So it's like a piano-led song this, and it reminds me quite a bit of, there's a Paul McCartney song on Egypt Station called Hand in Hand, which this one sounds very, very, very similar to that. Very kind of similar chord structure and very kind of similar way that like Alex Moore like delivers it. I mean, I don't suppose that they probably heard like that song, but that definitely like, reminds me of it. So it's got a very gorgeous melody to it, and again a really strong vocal performance like from Moore. I mean, I suppose it is a bit, it does then become this kind of string laden sort of ballad and that, and I suppose it's different for the Lathums, and that's why I suppose I like it so much, and I think it really stands out like on the album. If it was an album of songs just like this, I would maybe grow tired of it, but because it stands out a little bit and it is different, I would give this one like a 9 out of 10 for Turmoil. Okay, next track up is called Land and Sky. Now, this one is a little bit of a departure for them musically. It's kind of a more of like a groove like bass song. This one here, like in terms of like the verses, like and like they kind of like, you got all these kind of like sort of like vocal loops on it, but then you've got this kind of like again, it kind of then like does sort of go away for like that chorus line, like two wrongs don't make a right, two hearts intertwined, and you've got like there's a lot more kind of like sort of like backing vocals on it, and there's kind of like this kind of guitar riff what's kind of incessantly that goes like throughout like the song. Now I suppose I do appreciate them trying something new, like and a bit different, but for me it just seems to drag a little bit, this song, and it feels like it just kind of needs to like wind it up like a little bit sooner for me personally. But I mean I do I guess appreciate them trying something like a little bit different, but it's probably not a track I would play like outside like of the album, so that one would get a 7 out of 10. Okay, next up is Crying Out. Now this is a really good song. I mean, like when I was researching this video and kind of see like what other like critics and that thought of it, one review like I read described this as like if like the Lathums were written by like an AI chatbot, and I suppose like that's that for me is quite harsh, but my kind of opinion like on this song, which I'm giving a 10 out of 10 to, is possibly clouded a bit by the fact that I've known this song actually for a good while, because this was like funnily enough like their debut single released like all the way back like in 2019. So yeah, when I first seen the track listing for this album, I was really puzzled like by them including this song a little bit. I was a bit like like why is this song on here? But in a way I'm really glad it is, because it's always been a really great track, and it's always been a favourite like of like their like songs like for me, so I'm glad in some ways that it finds a home like on like this album. But this is a like I think it's done in a similar style to like the original one, but a little bit more laid back. The guitars are not quite as full on, and the kind of guitar solos and that are like a bit more very like Mark Knopfler-esque like this one here. Like I think like guitarist like Scott Conception's one of like biggest influences is like Mark Knopfler, like and like Dire Straits, and like you can definitely tell like with like this song he is definitely channeling like a bit like off that. But also vocally as well, this one is probably better than the original in terms of like more like he's really grown into the kind of like sort of like role like of like rock star vocalist. So yeah, for me a 10 out of 10 song. It's a song which I think lifts up the album like on like the kind of like the back half like of it. But again, it's a bit of a head scratcher why it's on the album. I guess it's maybe one of like these cases of like kind of like second album syndrome, where they're kind of scrambling around to find like material, perhaps, but also maybe you could say they maybe but just really like this song and just kind of wanted it to be heard by a wider audience. But still glad it's on the album, and adds a cracking 10 out of 10 track.
The way my life has changed. Okay,
now we're on to the closing track now, which is called Undeserving. Now this is a bit of a risk taker, this one here. It's an almost 8-minute length track, but very kind of bare bones, quite Dylan-esque this one here, but also quite conversational like in tone, with Alex Moore kind of giving a very kind of stream of consciousness kind of lyric. He sings like it's frightening what the mind can start to think at 9:30, like what's this funny feeling inside this little soul of mine. But then you've also got like some very happy lyrics. It kind of changes moods and kind of explores kind of, I guess, the thoughts what are kind of going on like in like his mind and that, like as like it kind of wanders. He kind of like, so there are some very nice, very uplifting kind of touching lyrics. He sings like, I can now safely say that I have no regrets. I'm happy with myself and all the friends I've met, all the places that we're going and all the things that we will do. I'm just so damn happy now that I'm doing them with you. So I guess it kind of like by the end of the song it kind of resolves itself, and we kind of get the picture like of kind of like like a young guy sort of fairly content like with like his life, and I guess ends the album on a quite like a positive like optimistic note like in some ways. And even though like it is almost 8 minutes long, for me this song is very engaging. It doesn't drag, and it kind of like I think it's a combination like of his vocal delivery and also the very subtle way that the instruments kind of like are added to the track, and it kind of slowly builds up. So yeah, again, I think a really good strong closer here, but I'm scoring it down a little bit because it's not one I would necessarily go to in isolation like off the album. It's certainly not a track I would put on, say, a best of the Lathums playlist like or anything, but I think as its function like as an album closer, it fulfills that really well. So yeah, Undeserving for me would get an 8 out of 10. Okay, so overall, this album would score 85%. So I'll just say right off the bat, I think the debut album is a lot stronger. When I reviewed that scored 90%. So definitely for me, this album suffers a little bit from the kind of classic second album syndrome for me, where the debut is kind of so good and they have so much time to kind of like labour over like the debut. It's almost impossible to follow it up, like kind of thing. And I mean, they didn't allow a huge amount of time between this. I mean, like the debut came out in November 2021, this one March 2023, so it's little over like a year, to be honest like with you. So I think maybe like a little bit more time, perhaps if they maybe left 2 years, they might have got a slightly stronger album like out of it. But despite me saying that though, there's not a bad track on here. There's just a couple of slightly more average tracks like for like kind of like the high standards like the Lathums like have like set like themselves, but also a couple of really strong classic tracks too, which will I think go down like as like yeah like really strong like Lathums songs. So things like Struggle, Say My Name, I Know Part 1, and Turmoil like in particular. So yeah, I think a really strong album here, a great second album, and yeah, just yeah, really eager to see kind of like yeah, like where like they go next for album number 3. So I hope you have enjoyed my review of this, and if you've got like any requests for future reviews, please do leave them down below in the comments, and I'll see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.
To a little soul like mine, it doesn't seem fair.